Welcome to Mortgage Sales Playbook. I'm Pat Sherlock, your host. My podcasts are where top producers, sales leaders, and industry experts share strategies that drive real sales success. No fluff, just actionable insights to help you master the art of selling and leading. Today's topic is a really powerful one, financial literacy and best practices. I have my great friend, Brian Vieaux. He's well known in our industry. He is president and CEO of FinLocker, and prior to FinLocker, had a long, successful career at IndyMac, Flagstar, Citi, and others. So, Brian, thrilled to talk to you today.
Pat, it's always good to catch up and connect.
Well, let's talk about this issue. I wanted to talk to you, and I'm glad we got to able to schedule it because, especially when the Rocket and Redfin and Zillow, it's obvious that these entities are seeing getting earlier in the process matters. And I think sometimes mortgage bankers kind of don't get that, and as a result, they're negative to the merger, and they cite all these other reasons. But the point is, I think what Rocket and these other entities are saying, earlier you are, the better it is. And that's really what, FinLocker is all about. So talk to me what you're seeing, what are lenders saying, what are loan officers thinking about it, because it's very clear they want to be first.
There is a lot there to unpack, and I'll start by addressing your comment that there's a lot of negative reaction to these acquisitions, and then there's some other rumored acquisitions that are out there too. And when I read the comments, the negative comments, very few of the comments are directed or indicate that this is bad for the consumer. Most of the comments are self-serving. It's bad for me as a loan officer. It's bad for me
Yes.
as an originator. And the way I look at it, and if I was back in mortgage origination, production management in particular, I would look at these transactions that are occurring as a playbook, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of money that's going into creating these playbooks. And if you're astute and smart and kind of watching the market, Rocket's kind of telling us
Right.
what the strategy should be and can be. Oh, by the way, what it will be. And so I take it down a level. So if we think about Rocket, Redfin, and don't forget Mr. Cooper, got to lump them in there. I think of that as kind of this macro playbook.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a brilliant playbook, by the way. I think it's a brilliant strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I also believe that the local loan officer can create the same playbook at a hyper local level, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to go spend billions on marketing and advertising and doing the things that the biggest brands are doing, but they can do things at a very hyper local level to position themselves as the best trusted resource for financial preparation, financial education. And it's different than what loan officers traditionally have done. Mm-hmm. And honestly, sadly, a lot of them still solely rely on a single strategy, which is referrals from agents. And I'll go on record and say, I don't think having a strategy where you get referrals from real estate agents is a bad plan. In fact, I think it's a very good plan. But what I do think is a bad strategy if that is all you rely on. And so yes. I've been teasing out this concept, and it's not really anything new. You've coached and trained on this forever, but it's more, loan officers really need to become more of a hybrid loan officer where some percentage of their business should come from partners in their community, whether it's real estate professionals, attorneys, CPAs, financial planners, et cetera. So some percentage should always come from those sources. But I believe loan officers need to have a strategy that starts to create their own top of funnel lead gen, almost like they're their own little consumer direct business where they're organically attracting consumers to them. And, maybe today they're 90% reliant on somebody else to refer, but tomorrow, next year, 2 years from now, that 90% could be 50%. And, I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a business where I'm in control, at least half of my business where I'm in control versus solely dependent on some third party to introduce me to people.
Well, you hit on one of my favorite topics, as you know, and I think it all does really center on that you need to have at the point of sale, the salesperson needs to be an influencer, and that's the social media component of it. And that puts you in the position of being an educator, not just a structure of a loan. Too often I see top management still stuck in the old idea that the loan officers really is the structure of the loan. You can see that that's going to get replaced pretty quickly. AI can do it better, and why waste time on it when something can do it better? So talk to me what you're seeing with lenders on the financial literacy side and seeing it as an origination strategy. I don't see that, and they really are missing that, but maybe you have better insight than I do.
Well, I think I'm fortunate that, and maybe it's not fortune, it's just, it's the people that I'm talking to.
The
I think
enlightened.
they happen to believe the strategy, and therefore they're talking to me and
Sure.
our team and looking at our technology. But before I go there, I want to just add another concept, because you said the term point of sale, and traditionally, and still today, a lot of loan officers are not introduced to a consumer until the point of sale, right?
Right.
Consumers introduced to loan officer by realtor, contract in hand. By the way, that's probably the most anxious that consumer is ever going to be in their life.
Correct.
And anxiety leads to all kinds of weird things in people. And, some of it could be, they could lack trust, because
Hmm.
Pat, I just met you and you're asking me for all this information. Oh my gosh, what if, they start thinking all the worst scenarios that could happen. And so what we challenge loan officers to do, and this goes with that hybrid concept, is yes, you still have to be available at the point of sale, and there's still going to be people that you're meeting for the first time when
Hmm.
contract in hand. And that's where you need to be proficient and professional in your skills around structuring, because that's frankly, sadly, you're going to have to do that because that's when you're first meeting the consumer. But the challenge that I give everybody is, how do you start showing up at the point of thought, right? with
Correct.
these with these consumers? And that's what we're talking about, is how do you have strategies and tactics that put you in a position to be thought of potentially before the realtor. and
Correct.
and
Hmm.
now imagine a scenario as a loan officer where you're engaging a prospective home buyer, first time home buyer, let's say 6, 12, 18 months before they're actually ready to purchase, right? Buy and
Hmm.
apply. And now you're building trust by educating and investing your time, your energy, your tools. If you have technology tools like FinLocker, as an example, you're investing your time in this consumer for 6, 12, 18 months and becoming a trusted financial resource, not just a transactional loan officer. And so now, fast forward, when it's time to buy and apply, the anxiety level of that consumer should be really low, because you've done such an excellent job preparing them for this process, including, letting them, really making it clear on what they're going to need when it's time to start that, formal loan application process. And so the anxiety's down. I'm not saying rate and price are not important, because I totally get it. We're in an environment where every nickel counts, but you're less likely to get shopped,
Chopped. Right.
for an eighth in rate, as an example, if you've invested that 6, 12, 18 months of time, energy, and expertise in this consumer. So now let's take it back to what I'm seeing in practice. Uh,
Yes.
I'm grateful and encouraged that I'm seeing this happen more often, but I'm also discouraged that I'm not seeing it at scale everywhere.
Hmm.
And I think part of it is most loan officers, we eat what we kill. And it's been a tough stretch here in the business and in the industry. And sometimes months are tight and it's hard to get excited about a 12-month, 18-month
Right.
nurture when I need a deal today to, pay my rent. I get that. And, at some point, people are going to have to make decisions. Individuals are going to make decisions whether this is the business for them, right? And
Hmm.
if I believe if you're not in a position as a loan officer to be able to invest 6, 12, 18 months into a first-time home buyer, you will be replaced pretty easily, frankly. And so I think the strategy today needs to have an eye on next year's pipeline by finding ways to nurture and educate and engage first-time homebuyers, especially just as early as possible in their process.
So talk about it because I know you follow, obviously are very involved with loan officers, and talk about what the better performing loan officers are doing and how they are using these tools. And is their willingness to invest in that time basically because they already have a book, a significant book of business, and this is just an add-on? Or do you see people that say, hey, this is going to be a first-time home buyer world. This is what it looks like. Doesn't look like refis are coming. Doesn't look like it's going to occur this year, that's for sure.
Right.
So how do you see the best doing it? And what are they looking like? Are they 100 years in our business?
Ah.
Hopefully that's not the case. And so, or are these people, talk about what you see.
So the really good news and encouraging news is I'm seeing it at all levels or all points on the continuum.
Hmm.
I'm actually seeing quite a few new, younger
Yeah.
professionals coming in, and understanding that they can be a difference maker by, leading with education, and a lot of them frankly are leveraging their personal brands on social media to build a
Hmm.
following, and they're building their following, and their brand is kind of attached to this concept of financial education, financial preparation, and home ownership, as an overlay. And so I see a lot of loan officers having success there, and success is defined differently. Some of these loan officers, you might not find them at the top 1% of the Scotsman Guide as an example, but they're growing their business organically, and really leveraging their personal brand as the anchor for that. I'm seeing seasoned loan officers, folks that have been doing this as long as you and I, having a similar path of success. And I actually think, if I think of a 20 something, 30, young 30
Hmm.
something, first time home buyer, sure, they're going to gravitate to a peer, right? One of their peers in age, but they might actually not mind the gray haired, expert loan officer that's been doing this in a bunch of different cycles and a bunch of different markets. And so I see some loan officers that have been at it for 15, 20 years, putting themselves out there, getting on social and creating content, leveraging their decades sometimes of experience. And they're quite successful at attracting an audience that way. So I kind of see it up and down the spectrum,
Yeah.
not just the younger people, and not just the newer to the business, but those that have been at it for a while. And what's really encouraging is watching some top producers, like the top one percenters, who kind of own their market, own their community from a real estate agent perspective.
Hmm.
They're actually leaning in and focused on building kind of an organic lead gen strategy that gets them in front of prospective consumers before there's a realtor involved.
So talk about, I'm curious, do you see corporate leadership behind this at all? And what I kind of see, it's really kind of left up to the loan officer who decides what strategy they want to have as their focus from a marketing standpoint. But you see corporations always saying that they want to do this, but there just seems to be this gap between, do they actually emphasize it, or is it's just left up to the loan officer to figure out that this is an opportunity that other loan officers aren't competing on?
So probably not a surprise, but
Yeah.
I see a little bit of both. I
Hmm.
do feel like the majority of companies
Hmm.
leave it to the loan officer. And I'll get a little controversial here. And I'm not a controversial guy, so this probably won't go viral, but I think we've done it to ourselves as an industry, though, right?
Hmm.
We've created this model of loan officer compensation and sign-on bonuses and all this stuff that's that's put so much value on the individual loan officer. And I do believe in a purchase market, the loan officer is still very, very, very important in the strategy for a company. But we've built this model that puts so much emphasis on so much of the revenue on a loan level basis going to the loan officer that it makes it more difficult for the company, the corporate entity, to provide additional support. And so those shops that tend to, I think, have more of the tendency to do big sign-ons and aggressive comp really push all the expense down to the branch, down to the loan officer.
Correct.
And then therefore they leave it to the loan officer to go seek coaching, seek advice, seek technology and tools versus having a strategy around the company that kind of builds this package. And so I am seeing companies, we have a lot of clients, a lot of enterprise clients that tend to build a solution and then use this solution as a hook to attract loan officers versus solely relying on the highest commission and sign-on bonuses. So I do see more companies kind of trying to find ways to package solutions that make them attractive to loan officers.
Well, I don't think it's controversial because I agree with you 100%. And of course, this is why we have a setup which I think fundamentally is actually not viable. It just doesn't work financially. And it's obvious when you look at the truly successful companies like the Rockets, the big guys, they became big guys because they don't have that model. That's
True.
why they
Yeah.
became big guys. And so, and therefore, this disconnect is operating in an old world concept that the loan officer kind of they're running, like I love to say, is they're running like a McDonald's franchise, but with no rules and
Yeah,
no
you can. Yeah,
direction.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can go buy
We,
go buy go buy your
yeah.
potatoes from Burger King if you
Yeah,
want. No big
it's
deal.
okay. Yeah. We don't care what the hamburger is like or
Yeah,
those French fries. And so that model, I think, is coming to the end. To me, just financially, it doesn't work. It only works in a refi market. I mean, that's the facts. And if we're not having one, then you have to ask the big questions. Where is the revenue coming when you have 50%? Ingenious has shown this a million times on LinkedIn. 50% of the loan officers only do 8% of the business. So you have a
yeah,
high expense level covering those people. It
yeah.
just economically doesn't make any sense. And so talk about the leadership, the ones that are enlightened, the companies that are enlightened. What are they doing with this topic and how are they rolling that out? And is it a strategy that, hey, at the end of the day, we need younger people as loan officers? I mean, I do think it does come to somewhat of that.
Yeah, I don't think it's meant. I don't think either you or I are saying these things in it with an ageism, angle at
No.
all. It's really a
Mhm.
fact of the matter that the last, statistic I saw, if you look at distributed retail loan
Mhm.
officers, the average age is still somewhere in the 50s. Maybe it could be mid to
Correct.
mid 50s. And so just, forget ageism or anything like that. We, as an industry, we have a need to bring kind of the next generation into the business, right? Otherwise, what happens to our business, 5, 10,
Sure.
15 years? So I do think there's a continual need for that. And you and I have had this conversation, I think, on your podcast before. We've talked about it on mine. We've talked about it in
Mhm.
at conferences that very few companies have a really good strategy for training and nurturing new loan officers. Everybody wants to hire the existing loan officer with a book of
Yeah.
business, great, but what about the strategy for building
Well,
your? And I think go ahead.
I would say I agree with you 100%. And part of what my latest thought on this whole thing is that, maybe it all comes down to how do you pay for them? I mean, that's really what the
Right.
issue is. It's
Yeah.
not like they
Yeah.
don't want them. They want them, but they won't know how to pay for them. So my latest strategy is senior junior program, which
Yeah.
we'll have to talk about as another
Sure.
podcast. But talk to me and talk to our listeners about when you see the successful utilization of financial literacy and getting early in the point of thought. How does that look? What are people doing? And what actually is successful?
Yeah, great question, and it's pretty wild to think about this, but it's almost like a Back to the Future moment to some degree. One of the things that I'm seeing be extremely successful, and success is defined by bringing new people into my funnel as a loan officer,
Right.
not necessarily closing loans today, but bringing
Hmm.
bringing new leads, if you will, new prospects into my funnel. And kind of a tried and true practice is community based first time home buyer seminars. So partnering up with your
Hmm.
your agents, partnering up in your community with, could be church groups, could be other community based groups, and literally conducting face to face live, home buying seminars, and not just like a one and done, but here's a 12-week, Saturday morning 45-minute session. We're going to meet every Saturday morning and cover all the basics over this 12-week period. So we've got a couple loan officers that have really been crushing it, and I say crushing it, they might have 8 to 10 people showing up at every one of these sessions, but they're also adding, the word of mouth is adding, and these are 8 to 10, maybe 20 people that start the process, of building their readiness. And that might take 6, 12, or 18 months. And again, these are folks that have the long game mentality. The the other side of that, which is really cool, I just watched a loan officer do this about a month ago, is taking the same content that you would present, in person, our series, right? And then using Facebook ads. So spending a little money for Facebook ads to bring consumers into, as a lead into this webinar where they sign up for a webinar. And I
Hmm.
saw a loan officer, they might have spent $100 in Facebook ads. They
Yeah.
ended up with 200 people that RSVP'd, said they'd come to the webinar.
Hmm.
80 actually showed up live. This particular loan officer is a client of ours, so he used a version of the FinLocker tech, and so every single person that showed up at the live webinar, the first thing that he did was put a QR code up and said, "Okay, this is going to be an interactive webinar. Download this app, and we're going to use this through the webinar." And so it became like this experiential teaching and educating. And then all those 80 people, when they left the webinar, Cole was the LO's name. He's on their phone 24/7, 365 as a mobile app. So I'm seeing kind of that, like I said, that Back to the Future,
Hmm.
roll up your sleeves, educate prospective first time home buyers as a good lead strategy. The other thing, and I want to offer your audience access to this, and they can reach out to you, Pat, for access to this. I'll send it to you. We created what we call a community partnership playbook. And this is a short and sweet, 5, 6 page playbook for a loan officer in every community to find local community based nonprofits that are housing related, and
Hmm.
go in and create a conversation with those local
Hmm.
housing
Yeah.
authorities or housing nonprofits to offer a free service, a free resource. And our tech is part of the playbook. Doesn't have to be, but I think it's part of the hook. But the loan officer is the real resource for these community-based nonprofits. And yeah, you might have 15 people that come into your pipeline, and 10 of them might be 12 months away from even being ready. But again, it goes back to what we talked about at the onset of the
Yeah.
conversation. Wouldn't you rather be building trust in 12 months from now, having these people come into your application pipeline versus hoping that they get introduced to you in 12 months by one of your realtor partners?
Well, I think your technology is really cool. I don't know why every loan officer in our business doesn't use it. So it's just the smart way. And really all the things that you're mentioning are our world of selling today. So Brian, do you have a couple, our time's flying by, a couple key practices that you want to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I would say, if you're listening in today and for whatever reason you haven't embraced social media, and you're just stuck. And there's a lot of people that are
Yeah.
stuck. I think there's, people have the imposter syndrome and all the stuff that gets in our way.
Yeah.
Most of what gets in our way is what's in between our ears. Every one of us as a loan officer, every one of you that's listening has a story to tell. And the story may not have doesn't have to necessarily be about you, but you have a story to tell about somebody you helped, right? Buy a home, get their first home,
Right.
navigate a difficult situation. And so I would do an assessment and look back over the last 12 months and pick out the two or three challenging scenarios that you helped resolve and tell stories about those. Because if you've helped one person with a challenge and you can get out and tell that story, I guarantee there's 10 more people in your community that are like, oh my gosh, I know such and such, they're going through this, or I myself have that same exact scenario. I'm going to call Pat because this is great. This is the perfect time. I never knew I could get help doing this. So turn your tough scenarios, your tough deals into stories. Now, you can't give away. You got to be careful of how much you say about the person you helped, but that's a great place to start is where you've had success and turn those into stories. I see too many loan officers. The stories they tell on social are all about me, 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 me.
Correct.
I did this, I closed this loan in 7 days. Nobody cares. They just don't care. Tell
Yeah.
their story. Make your customer the hero of the story, and I guarantee you'll get more attention that way.
Well, I think that's a great strategy. I can't agree with you more. And I think the old ideas of it's all a rate and product business is really obviously fundamentally wrong because that's not our world today. We have too much competition. So, Brian, how can people get a hold of you to chat about all of this?
Yep. So best place to catch me is on LinkedIn. So, follow me on LinkedIn, send me a message there. Of course, you can go to finlocker.com. We're happy to give anybody that's interested a look at what we're doing. And then Pat, I don't know if you can put in your show notes my email address, but certainly
Sure.
shoot me an email. I'd love to connect, and it doesn't have to be about FinLocker. If you're stuck and you need help just thinking about strategies in your community that you're looking for, I'm happy to have those conversations.
He really means it. So I can emphasize I've known Brian for a long time. And so he is certainly one of our icons in our business and he's a straight shooter. So reach out to him. And I want to thank all our listeners for listening today and certainly subscribe to our podcast. We love to have you with us. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Pat.
That's a wrap for this episode. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your team. Want more proven sales strategies? Visit patsherlock.com for expert resources, coaching, and sales training. Until next time, keep selling smarter and not harder.